All right, here we are with the 5 steps of evidence-based practice. And so you, throughout your social work careers, will hear this term, evidence-based practice, over and over. It is kind of one of those tenets of social work, is having everything you do be evidence-based, because it does bring validity and kind of justification to why we do what we do. It helps honestly protect the clients, so their social worker is not just kind of going rogue and being like, well, this sounds great, I think this is a good idea. It protects them because it forces the social worker to do something that they've been able to research and have shown and proven to actually work for others, and so there's a good chance that it could work for their client. Also protects the social worker as well. So if a client comes back and says, well, you did something that caused me harm, or it didn't give me the outcomes I wanted, well, the social worker can come back and be like, well, I use this is evidence-based, and it does provide a little protection for the social worker as well. So there's 5 steps to kind of consider when making something be evidence-based. And so this itself could be a whole nother class. There's a lot of information and details related to evidence-based practice. So this is just going to kind of give you an overview of what it means to be evidence-based, and kind of how to get your mind around, like, why do we do evidence-based, and how, like, what would that look like? It's very generalized, but it's a really good foundation. It breaks it down a lot on page 70 and 71 of your textbook if you want to read it in a little bit more detail. But I'm just going to go over the 5 steps and what this would look like if you implement it into your social work. Well, you will implement it into your social work practice. So the 5 steps, and I did not put numbers to them. I don't know why. It kind of bothers me. So I'm just going to tell you which ones are number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. And then we'll go through them. So first, you'll construct a well-structured, answerable question that will guide practice. This is all about what Chapter 2 is going to cover. So you should have read it by now, because the Chapter 2 review will be due on Thursday. So you'll kind of have the information beforehand, but we'll start talking a little bit about questions in the next couple of slides. But number 1, you're going to make a well-structured, answerable question that will guide your practice. Number 2, you're going to find the best available evidence in which to answer the question that you created. Number 3 is applying critical thinking and analyzing the evidence, checking for its validity, its impact on the clients, and if it's applicable to your practice in the population you are working with. Number 4, you'll use critical analysis of the research to guide your practice decisions. So it's kind of the intervention level. And then number 5 is evaluating the effectiveness of the intervention with your clients within your practice. And so it actually really follows the general method. In some ways, there's bits and pieces that reflect it and kind of mirror it, but it is its own unique kind of path to making sure whatever you're doing is evidence-based. So we are going to break down each step in the next slide. So first, you are going to construct a well-structured, answerable question that will guide practice. I love that they actually point out that the question has to be answerable. It might seem like a duh, but it would amaze you with some of the things that you think you might be able to answer, but there's just no realistic way that you can do that given your population, your resources, or even just the general logistics around it. So you want to make sure that whatever question you are going to research and try to address is in fact answerable. So another acronym for the day, we got PICO. So questions often have these 4 elements, and PICO is the acronym. So 1, what is the population that you are targeting? I, what is the intervention that you are targeting or going to be exploring? C, what may the intervention be compared to? And O, what is the hoped for outcome? So population, intervention, comparisons, and outcomes are the 4 things that you want to make sure are integrated into a well-structured and well-thought-out research question. So when you start to explore your research project, we know that, kind of bare bones, your populations are going to be college-age students that are adults, because we're not just minors, because you have to get consent, and it's really annoying. So I'm helping you out and creating less work for you by making sure we focus on adult populations. So we know that they're going to be college age. Now this might get more specific if you decide just to do females, males, one college or a different college. You might specify around race or sexual orientation. Those are things that you could do, but we know bare bones your population is college age students. Interventions, this is going to look very different. And it might be present in your research question. Your research questions might be a little bit more exploratory than implementation of an intervention. Comparing to, so if you do implement some sort of intervention, which I don't know that we have the time and space for that, and we'll kind of flesh this out some more, but you would want to have a focus group and a comparison group, and kind of what are you hoping for to occur based on the intervention that you're implementing. So that's kind of how it very generally relates to our projects. But I do have another question up here because I think it does help kind of flesh out what the PICO looks like in a question format. So this is an example of a well-structured answerable question. So the question is, are people diagnosed with alcohol dependence who regularly attend Alcoholics Anonymous, so AA, meetings, are they more abstinent from alcohol use than similar individuals who do not attend AA? So if we're going to pull out the PICO of this question, we have our population, which is individuals who are diagnosed with alcohol dependence. So that's a target population. The intervention is attending AA meetings. And it's actually, I wanted to make sure I didn't just put AA because that would make making the assumption that everybody knows what AA is. You want to make sure it's crystal clear that when you're referring to AA, you're not assuming that everybody knows what AA is, and you're really specifically identifying that that is Alcoholics Anonymous. Actually, it should be an S on there. So I messed that up, but we're going to roll with it. So population, people diagnosed with alcohol dependence. Intervention, attending Alcoholics Anonymous. The comparison group is people who do not attend Alcoholics Anonymous. And the outcome would be, are they abstinent from alcohol use? And so you have those four elements. The research that you're going to explore and maybe intervene, or intervention that you're going to be implementing, is referring your clients who are alcoholic dependent to AA meetings in the hopes that they will abstain from alcohol. So that's stage one. Step two would be finding the best available evidence in which to answer the questions. And so you are going to want to start exploring, like if you have this inkling that AA meetings would be helpful for a client, you're going to want to start looking for literature to help support that. To say, yes, this has been found to be a very effective way to help individuals stop consuming alcohol who might have a dependency on it. So this can include looking at like research journal articles and electronic databases, looking for systematic reviews on the topics, which is something we'll learn about later, looking at practice guidelines, so looking at who are the experts in the situation. So SAMHSA is Substance Abuse and Mental Health Association. It's kind of the government organization that addresses substance use and mental health. It's the big one that's kind of the gold standard for substance use and intervention. So looking at what they recommend, how they recommend AA being implemented. Do they just have to attend meetings? Do they have to work the steps? So you're going to look to see like the specifics around the intervention. There might be trainings on how to do X, Y, and Z with this population, or looking over other randomized controlled trials where they had a group receive an intervention and a group in control, which they didn't receive the intervention, and were their outcomes different. So this is where you kind of use that internet cafe mentality, looking at the research and seeing what fits best with your situation. Step 3 is apply critical thinking in analyzing the evidence, so the stuff that you found in your research, checking for validity, impact on the clients, and applicability for practice. That is an incredibly wordy step. What this really means is you want to take into consideration any issues of the validity of the research that you did. So there's internal and external validity. So it might be looking at, was it implemented in an ethical way? Were there external factors that might have influenced the outcomes? Was it done, like if you're looking at the sampling, was it only done on individuals who maybe were in rural communities where there were not a lot of AA meetings actually available that fit people's schedules, that were on a bus line, that were easily accessible? And so that might have a different outcome than somebody who might be in more of an urban setting where there's close to a bus line, there's lots of meetings going on, there's a lot more resources available. Those two different sample populations might have different outcomes. You have to take that into consideration. Looking at all of the statistical analysis, the intent is that everybody would have taken stats before they've taken research. I know that's not always the case given sequencing with courses, but all of those things you learned in stats, so means, modes, medians, t-scores, all of those analytical tools to show, is this research study actually valid and work on our clients? So let's say you found that evident research showed that AA meetings were really powerful in abstinence for males in their 40s who had limited support systems. Well, this happens to be your client who's 42 and he's male and he is a refugee, so he doesn't have a lot of supports in town because his family is all in his country of origin. So hey, this actually really fits my my client's needs. He lives on a bus line. He can get to AA meetings around his work schedule, so we're going to go ahead because it's applicable for my specific client's needs. Step 4 is using this critical analysis then to research or on the research to guide your practice decisions. So like I used the example before, if research shows that it works specifically on a unique population with these demographics and that happens to match your client, then yes, absolutely, you would probably want to integrate what you research. If it matches, you want to integrate that into your practice and recommend it to your client to use. Now, your client might meet all of the criteria, but he doesn't want to quit drinking. And so no intervention is probably going to work if he's in the pre-contemplative stage of change. And so you might match it really, really well based off of the research, but you do have to take in your client's unique values and preferences. There might be a language barrier. And so is there an AA meeting that's in his native tongue? That would be a consideration. So they might attend meetings, but if they're not actually understanding what they're saying, well, that's not going to be helpful at all. So you want to be able to look at your client's needs and values preferences and make sure it matches. You also want to make sure that you stick to any sort of code of ethics or professional guidelines. So within AA, you have sponsors. And so that's proven, it's evidence-based to show that having a sponsor is really helpful for sobriety. And so since this client doesn't have a lot of supports in town, he doesn't know a lot of people, he's asked you as the social worker to be the sponsor. Now, literature shows that a sponsor is a positive intervention in promoting sobriety. However, the code of ethics is very, very clear about making sure you don't have a dual relationship with your client, making sure you're practicing within the scope of social work. And so you would want to take into consideration, is being his sponsor something that, okay, I am doing a lecture. Can you figure it out? Thank you, love. So you want to make sure that even though literature says one thing, you don't want to violate code of ethics within that. So keeping that in mind. And the final step then is you want to evaluate the effectiveness of the intervention, but you want to make sure you do this with your client. I mean, the step, like I say, is rather self-explanatory. We learned about this in the general method. Like, it's part of the process of engaging with a client is after you implement something, you want to know, did it work, did it not? But you want to make sure you elicit some of your client's perspective within it, because we might see one thing, but they might see something else. And so asking your client and getting some information from them, that is going to be really good. Qualitative because it's kind of giving the descriptive information versus like kind of that quantitative, like yes or no, did they stop drinking? Something that you can measure, like their use. But talking to your client, like, was this a purposeful intervention? They might say, absolutely, I've met somebody, lots of people in my community who I can lean on. I was able to connect with a sponsor that the AA meetings recommended to me, and from that, I've grown my community. Or they might be like, I didn't like this. It didn't work within my work schedule. I was never able to attend at a time that worked. I didn't find this purposeful at all. So there might be something going on that you didn't know that talking to your client can then give you additional information into the effectiveness of your intervention. There you go. Those are the 5 steps. So it's really important to remember that you just have to have critical